This video is very kindly sponsored by Bellesa, who with me are doing a massive giveaway of free vibrators and gift cards, so stay tuned for more. You know, before this moment in my personal history, I was very big on the benefits and the advantages of platonic relationships with men. That is, as a woman. In my humble opinion, I think that the best way to bridge divisions, to dispel miscommunications, to establish sympathy with the aliens, is to bring them into our personal lives, is to form a personal investment with them, is to realize that the aliens aren't so different from us females. Remember, E.T. was a boy. So I found it most enlightening seeing how male-female friendships are perceived online, which is basically always A, men are never friends with women who they don't secretly want to sleep with, or B, women are only friends with men to make higher value men and other women jealous of the male attention they have. And I think with all of this in mind, I have been seeing a lot of videos lately of young women especially, but also just women in general, being done with their male friends and ending their male friendships for good. They've purged these male friends from their lives and they are ultimately done with the shenanigans of male-female friendships.
I ended a long-term friendship with a man yesterday, and the argument started because he said to me, "Victoria, I feel like you don't like me because I'm a man." And I said, "I don't dislike you because you're a man. I dislike you because of what you do because you're a man." I then felt comfortable with maybe expressing that I felt extremely unsafe this one particular period of time where there was a creep in my comments who was making extremely uncomfortable comments about me, to which I responded by blocking him. And my friend came to that man's defense by saying, "Oh, but he was just saying what we think on the inside." Which, by the way, if you don't know the difference between thinking something and saying something, it's called self-control, being aware of your filters. And I was like, that's a huge red flag because one, I am your friend and he is a stranger. And the fact that you empathize with a stranger over me is telling.
I have lost 100% of the guy friends who have said they liked me. Seriously, not a single guy friend that I've had in all my years that has confessed to me, I am still friends with. Some guys saying, "Oh yeah, like girls, they know." Yeah, we know, and we're not gonna say anything because as soon as we acknowledge it, as soon as that secret's out in the open, that friendship is over. Like, if you tell me that you like me and I don't like you back, it seems selfish and inconsiderate for me to just keep being friends with you and just acting normal when I know that you want something more. The right thing to do feels like to give you your space so that you can move on. And it's always very sad. We're friends and then they either tell me they like me or somehow it gets out and then we both sort of have to acknowledge it. And oftentimes there's a period where they either ignore me or they ghost me, or in some cases they start getting really mean. And then we just don't really talk anymore and you just kind of become very cordial with each other. No, I think this is just like something that happens to girls that people don't really talk about.
So considering the wizard Liz has decided to misuse YouTube's copyright system and copyright claim my latest video, I've decided to do a personal one because I do not have the mental strength nor the amount of savings to deal with such nonsense anymore. Yeah, I really do miss these videos of just a story time, just talking to you about my life and something that has happened or my personal history. I know that at the moment, for some reason, oversharing is very not trendy. Oh well. I find it very cathartic. And you know what else I find cathartic? Vibrators. And thanks to Bellesa sponsoring today's video, you can also find vibrating catharsis in signing up to my exclusive giveaway. I am absolutely thrilled to be working with Bellesa again because I am a huge believer in sexual expression and sexual wellness, and Bellesa is all of that. Bellesa is a bi-woman company with an emphasis on empowering everybody and anybody to explore, embrace, and celebrate their sexuality. My first sex toy I ever got myself was actually from Bellesa, due to just hearing through the grapevine that the quality assurance of Bellesa's toys is just unmatched by anyone. And the attention to detail of their products for all genders, for singles and for couples is honestly incredible. Now there is a whole catalog, a variety of Bellesa toys on offer for you to choose from and to tickle your fancy. But my personal all-time favorite has got to be the Air Vibe, especially with its dual stimulation. Its flexibility means that it is suited for all body types and that it will be perfect inevitably for you and for what you may want. The suction feature, at least personally, I think is perfect for anybody who struggles to reach or if you really need that kind of stimulation that you can't really find, I would argue, with anything other than this little guy. There's a number of different intensities that you can choose from, a total of 5 whole intensities that you can choose from actually. Setting number 1 does it for me personally, but if you are a Ferrari down there, then there are a plethora of settings that I'm sure you can conquer. And there's absolutely no denying just how elegant and how like sophisticated it looks. I love the design of this toy, and especially the design of its case. I think its case, which is also rechargeable, is just as lovely. And as I said, this case is not only discreet, it is also rechargeable. Its materials are also waterproof, like most of Bellessa's toys, at least the ones that I have in my personal arsenal. It's just perfect for a lovely wind down or wind up at the end of a long day. So enjoy. So if you want to get your hands on one of these beautiful Lush toys, then use my link down in the description box to get yourself a free gift card or a free toy. And this isn't a catch at all. I actually signed up to one of these on one of my favorite YouTubers, Megan Ann's channel, a little while back, and I got myself a gift card and got myself another toy, so it was great. Everybody wins something as long as you use my unique link. Thank you so very much to Bellessa for sponsoring this video and for supporting the channel, and thank you to you for supporting Bellessa, which then results in these opportunities for me. Not only do I hope, but I know that you will enjoy your gift card and your toy. And now let's get back to this story time, because I can tell you after relaying this, I'm going to need some vibrating catharsis.
Do 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 boom boom do 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 kung kung do 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 do. Thanks, I hope you enjoyed that.
Now, one thing that you need to know about me is that I have found it incredibly difficult to make friends since moving to the UK. I went from being incredibly popular and people liked me and having friends and all of that, yada yada yada, to not having any friends. And so it has been very, very difficult for me to make friends and, more importantly, to sustain long-term friendships. And after this whole situation, I am more inclined to believe that my not having a lot of friends here and finding it very difficult to make friends here is actually more so a blessing than a curse. I recently got broken up with by my best male friend, Lachlan, and I think our friendship and the very toxic and vicious love triangle that it turned into really demonstrates the distinction between a good friendship and a bad friendship. It feels very strange to say that I just got broken up with by Lachlan when it wasn't a romantic relationship, but I do think that we don't really talk a lot about how painful the end of a friendship can be, how ending a friendship when it does end, especially when it is definitively ended and doesn't just sort of wither out over time, how difficult that can be. And I think because these are the most common relationships in our life, it seems bizarre to me how we don't actually pay more heed and attention and concern to the end or the breakup of friendships. It's really sad, actually. Now, there is so much on reflection, going through this on my own and also going through this with a therapist, that has made me realize that our entire friendship from the get-go was entirely manufactured by Lachlan. None of it was organic. None of it was just circumstance or that this just happened because this just happened. I was duped and I let myself be duped. And so this is a lesson to all of you to just be wary, to be wary of the Lachlans of the world, and to also be wary of yourself when you encounter the Lachlans of the world, because I did some damn stupid things, okay? We will get into all of that. The whole friendship, I realized, started from a place of parasociality and limerence. And I'll explain what limerence is in due course because I think some context is needed for that. But I think it would be good to detail this very interesting little story in a series of lessons about what to look for and signs to look for in a bad friendship. I call this series of lessons why your male best friend never was and never will be your friend. Number 1, your first meeting was meticulously orchestrated. Picture this. You get an email from a man called Lachlan, who is an art lover and has city connections. And he knows by perusing your social media that you like a particular person that he knows personally. Lachlan then tells you that this person knows you, they know your work, and they really want to meet you. Now, obviously, I didn't think anything of this at the time. I just wanted to meet this particular person person because I am a huge fan of this particular person. So I was like, sure. But then, lo and behold, you meet this person and something is a bit off. What I really noticed was that this person actually didn't know who I was. They didn't want to meet me. This wasn't like some reunion of like mutual minds or anything. They honestly didn't really know who, actually they didn't know who I was, like at all, okay? They didn't know who I was. In fact, when you ask them further questions, they tell you that they didn't know who you were until Lachlan mentioned you and kept going on and on about you to them.
That's suspicious.
Yeah, it's fine.
That's weird.
They don't actually know or particularly like you, but you are a very nice person and they are very happy to have met you. Now, importantly, I only met Lachlan in the flesh on 2 occasions for a total of 10 hours face to face. 10 hours we met in the flesh, us together talking one-on-one. I was in a major British city. He offered to be my host while I was there, and it all went very smoothly, swimmingly, in fact. We spoke about books. We spoke about the Smiths. We went and saw a very beautiful chapel. It was all very lovely, all very quaint, all very sort of touristy, person going about a part of the city, looking, umming and ahhing, having a nice time with a tour guide, essentially. And when I left, I was very much under the impression that this was the end of things, that this was ultimately just like sort of a professional encounter and relationship, just him being somebody who wanted to connect me with somebody, and that was that. And so I really didn't think I was ever going to see him again, to be honest. And I was right. I never saw him again in person. And oh, if only things could have ended there. The second reason why your male friend never was and never will be your friend is because he tells you one thing and does something else. 6 days passed since he has been my host in this major British city, and I, on the 6th day, get a message. Hey Z. I'm sorry, I'm going to read all of this very dramatically because this really builds up to the drama and the melodrama of this entire situation that I think really needs to be brought home from the beginning of this story time. Hey Z, I don't know whether it's right to send this message or not, but I guess it's a mistake I'm willing to make. In so many words, Lachlan says that he wants to get to know me better, but importantly, he also tells me that he appreciates that we live on completely opposite sides of the country, and so he isn't looking for a romantic relationship, at least not immediately, and not in the conventional sense of dating. That is, our dating wouldn't be a long distance situationship. It would be more of a just getting to know each other and seeing where things go. Now, I'm not one for rejecting people because rejection and abandonment is quite literally the story of my life. And so it is the thing that gives me the least pleasure, and I fortunately have not found myself in that situation, except in this one example. Based on everything that he said about not wanting this to be a romantic situation in the conventional sense, or for this to be a casual relationship, or for this to be some kind of alternative relationship or what have you, that this was just about getting to know each other ultimately, I was perfectly okay with doing that. Personally, I've only met this guy twice. I spent a maximum of 10 hours with him. I have absolutely no qualms with getting to know him a bit better. I'm actually delighted to, because our first meeting was actually a really nice meeting. I importantly asked him for clarification because I didn't at that point really understand what he was trying to say. On the one hand, he was saying that he wants to get to know me better, and on the other hand, he was saying that he isn't looking for a long distance relationship, even though he appreciates that we live on opposite sides of the country. And I do remember saying to him on our first encounter very explicitly that I absolutely hate big cities and I could never live in a big city like the city that he lives in. And I was quite reassured with the clarification that he gave me. He said that he distinguishes between girlfriends and friends, or girls who are friends. That he is not, I repeat, not looking for a long distance thing. He said that he's looking for a girlfriend, but that he liked me enough that he was willing to see where this may potentially go over the long term, even though he wasn't looking for a long distance relationship. I don't know why this didn't like sort of spark something in my mind, but anyway, it didn't. And I said, well, you know, that's fine. Thank you for the clarity, appreciate it. And I would also be very willing to get to know you over a long period of time and very slowly. Now, I didn't see this going anywhere at all. I really did just see this as something of a just getting to know somebody and it ultimately just fizzling out over time, as they all do. And I was perfectly happy to entertain that because honestly, as I said, I don't like doing rejection. I don't do rejection of people. It's really not my forte whatsoever. And I also, at this point, had for about nearly a year been exclusively dating only women. I didn't say this to him because I hadn't said this to anyone. I have not been open about my sexuality until very recently. Interestingly, he doesn't ask me once what I'm looking for, which is sort of kind of a staple of our friendship. He never asked me about me, and this is very important, especially for the context which I'm about to bring up. I ask him questions like, what is he looking for? What does he want in a relationship? Is he happy with being in a long distance relationship with somebody, or doesn't he want to be in a long distance, etc. Anyway, one day passes from us establishing the foundation of this very slow getting to know you, that we are going to get to know each other and just see what happens. Sure, fine with that. I know where this is heading. At least I think I do. Now, as I want to emphasize, I do not know this guy from Adam. I only know him professionally via email, via him being a tour guide to me. That's pretty much all I know of him. I've spent 10 hours with him, and he's also just told me that he wants to take a long time getting to know me, that he's perfectly happy not doing the conventional getting to know somebody situationship that you have, right? And now he's invited himself, or is trying to invite himself over to my house to stay for the weekend. I do appreciate that he acknowledges that it's probably too soon, but I still thought that this was quite interesting on reflection, that this was very much an example of somebody saying one thing and doing another thing. But there was something else very important here that caught my attention, and that was this message. P.S. As redundant and useless as a fart in an empty room is a line worthy of the thick of it. Now, this took me a hot minute to actually understand what was being said here. I had to think for a while. I was thinking, what on earth is this? What are you quoting? Should I know this? Is this from a book? Did we discuss a film or something that I've forgotten that we discussed? Is this some kind of quotation from that? Am I being stupid? And then it hit me.
But of course, everybody has just moved on or doesn't care whatsoever. Going into the new year, these moments will be as redundant and useless as a fart in an empty room.
Now, obviously, I cannot have a problem with somebody watching my videos. That's nonsensical. To have a problem with somebody watching your videos or to think that it's odd, that's nonsensical. I do not have a problem with that in the slightest at all. That's completely fine. Do what you will with your free time. Thank you. What I do find a bit odd is quoting me verbatim and letting me know indirectly that you are watching me. I don't know if this is just a me thing with this, but I do find that a little bit unsettling. I don't find that terribly, especially for somebody who I don't know at all. Anyway, thanks. Blessings and riches. Lesson number 3. He tells you he loves you. So in the period of under a month, we have a total of 2 Zoom calls. And these are just Zoom calls where we talk about books, about films. We just have very, conversations that are quite sort of pop intellectual conversations, really. Great conversations. Loved having them. Don't regret them. We had a hoot of a time talking about films. I would call my friendship style very Q&A, and I think that this dynamic works very well for my male friendships, and is why I think I'm quite good with my male friendships. This is because I love asking questions. I really like asking people questions and sort of listening to their answers, digesting them, and then asking sort of follow-up and following questions and leading questions. That's what I like to do. And because of this style of how I do friendships, I find it very easy to notice when somebody doesn't ask me questions back. My friendship with Lachlan was very Q&A-esque. I would ask questions, he would give answers, and he very much liked the sound of his own voice. And I did notice, especially when I spoke to my therapist and reflected with my therapist about this friendship, this new friendship that I had, that one thing that was quite dissatisfying to me was that I didn't get any questions asked of me. There were no questions asked about what I liked. There weren't questions asked about what I I liked to read, about what I was doing, I would ask a question such as, okay, so what book are you reading at the moment? Because I'm looking for something new to read because I've just finished reading XYZ book. It was a great book. And we spoke a handful of times via message, but not frequently because, as all my friends know, I am not good at virtual communication. I hate messaging or anything. My phone is purely an iPod. I actually do tell all of my friends the exact same anecdotal story, that if they get kidnapped or if they get arrested and they have one opportunity of escape or they can make one phone call, they must not call me because they will inevitably end up spending either another night in prison or they will end up. And I do definitely think that my lack of virtual communication is why I don't have friends, because I very much depend on that in-person sort of dynamic with people. Very much so. Which is also why, as I said, I was not very hopeful of this friendship sort of like actually progressing into anything big. Now, as I said briefly, I had known by this point that I was interested in women, and I was exclusively, at least for a year up until that point, exclusively dating and pursuing women. I hadn't told anybody about this until I decided that I was going to make a YouTube video just about my thoughts and feelings. And at this point, after we had these 2 Zoom calls and had known each other for about a month at this point, I thought it was time to tell him this. So I had a feeling that his feelings of getting to know me slowly were progressing, not just because he'd already suggested coming to stay with me for a whole weekend, but because he had made the suggestion again, and because of the conversations that we're having, which, as I said, were very Q&A, me asking him questions and me ultimately turning into some kind of therapist for him. I just logically deduced that inevitably I thought that his feelings were probably not platonic but now romantic. I had to nip this in the bud pretty quickly. I was running out of excuses and I really was just getting a bit uncomfortable. So I wrote my own long message. So it was a long message of explaining things and some personal things about medicine that I was on, depression, or yada yada yada, all of that. Not very interesting. But this is, I think, the most important part to know. At the end of my message explaining my sexuality, I had the following to say. This is cliche, but I do genuinely mean it when I say that I greatly value this getting to know you situationship that we found ourselves in here. But I do want to be transparent before letting this go further, which would, with all the clarity I've gotten in the past few days, be unfair to you. I'm also sorry and understand completely if you don't want to be friends after this. Most importantly, I just really do hope, and I'm sure that you will find what you want romantically. I just don't see myself as a person who's going to bring that into your life, and for that, I am really sorry. Anyway, I don't feel very comfortable messaging about these kinds of things, so if you'd like to have a Zoom call to talk or clear anything up, I'm home most evenings this week. And so we scheduled a Zoom call for the following week. And apparently, this didn't hurt his feelings at all. In fact, he told me that he wasn't heavily invested at all in our relationship being romantic whatsoever. That this was all just a getting to know you sort of thing, that this was ultimately about friendship, and that was it. I felt so stupid because in my mind, I'd really gotten this idea that, you know, because of how things had gone so well in the past few weeks of us talking, especially with the 2 Zoom calls that we had, that this really did mean something big to him. And he even clarified this in a message a little bit later. When I mentioned at the start, that is, of our Zoom call, that I wasn't heavily invested, just to clarify, I am indeed heavily invested in our friendship and the connection I have with you. You mean a lot to me, honestly, more than anybody has in a long while. I just meant that I wasn't heavily invested in only one idea of us as a romantic couple, to the extent of only wanting that and nothing else. I'm sure you got that anyway. I just hope it didn't come across as me saying, it's fine, I didn't care that much anyway, because that is untrue. But that message gave me such relief. I was like, okay, it's fine. Men and women can be friends. It's good. This is good. His response was just so understanding, so cordial. I was like, yes, this is what I need. This is what everybody needs in a friend. Oh, I was so wrong. Now, a whole month passed. We didn't have any Zoom calls. We only spoke to each other a maximum of twice a week via message, just sharing passages from books or from films that he wanted me to watch, that sort of thing. Importantly, during this time, he went abroad. And so obviously we were living living our very separate lives. Now, out of the blue, and I mean literally out of the blue, a whole month has passed. I have not spoken to him, like aside from him sending me a song that he wanted me to listen to, me saying, nice song, that's great, hope you're doing well, check in later. Nothing else. We said nothing else. So this is completely out of the blue. I get a 7-minute voice message. Now, it's times like these when I wish that I had a moral compass that was a little bit more shaky than what it is, and that I could actually just play this voice message, because it is a work of art, okay? It's beautiful. Picasso could never. But alas, that is sadly not going to happen. But I can tell you some of the very interesting things that he said. Basically, Lachlan told me that his romantic feelings had actually grown a lot stronger since I had told him about my sexuality. He found himself thinking about me all day. Even though he didn't want to send this voice message, he simply had to send it. Even though he accepts the answer that I have given him. There's nothing more that he wants to do than to be with me in the same space, to come and stay with me in my house. I'm sorry, I just have to smile through the pain and the melodrama. And even though in this voice message he told me that he accepts the answer that I gave him, that he knows my answer, am I sure? Was my appraisal of myself correct? He said that I have been nothing more than kind and understanding to him, but still, am I sure? Now, I think the finale of this voice message is perhaps the most important aspect of it. This is a direct quote. I will get over this because people do every day, but I'm not in a mad rush to get over it or to exercise it like it's some kind of demon. Now, brethren, yeah, I'm looking at you because I'm building this parasociality, okay? Because, you know, this is clearly all that I'm worth. If you're in love with somebody and they don't reciprocate your feelings and you still want them in your life as a friend, you need to get over your feelings as quickly, as rapidly as possible. It is so unhealthy, but also so selfish to the object of your desires to just wallow in those feelings, and especially to let them know that you are not going to try to get over your feelings for them, that you're not going to try to like sort of exercise them. You're not in a mad rush or whatever he said. Because I'm in a much better place mentally right now, and we will get into that because that is very crucial context, I didn't realize how unhealthy, how toxic, and I hate using this word, but it's a perfect description of this. I did not realize how unhealthy and how toxic this was. And I also didn't realize how, as I said, selfish this was, because it ultimately expected me to be friends with a person who was expressing their romantic feelings for me, respecting that, appreciating that, and having to somehow balance those feelings with being their friend, and somehow having to help them keep that boundary when the mere existence of our relationship creates friction or completely distorts this boundary, makes this boundary non-existent. So I am as much to blame for the fact that after getting this voice message, I did ignore him for like a good 2 weeks, but I still said, thank you for your vulnerability. You do not have to apologize for this at all. I really do understand and appreciate this and what you have said, but we should talk about this in person. I was as much to blame for my response to this. I was in a terrible mental state at this time. Again, I will explain all of this, but still, that's no excuse for how stupid I was. Damn. And I'm just as much to blame for all of this based on my naivete. I said that there's no need to apologize for anything. I said that what he said was entirely valid and understandable. And I suggested that we speak in person over Zoom about this because I think it's just better to say things face to face to people. I think there's just a lot more transparency and honesty, a lot less curation of messages and what you're going to say, etc. And I really think that the reason I said this is because I just personally knew how terrible it felt to be rejected. As I said, for the past year, I had been dating exclusively women. And when I tell you that I had been rejected by every single woman that I had been dating, and by dating, I meant that I went on like 3 dates, probably maximum with a woman. And then she decided that she just wanted to be friends, and that was the end of it. Or I just got ghosted and that was the end of it. That is basically basically the story of my life dating woman, of how it had been. And so this feeling of how awful it was to be rejected, how absolutely gut-wrenching it was to be rejected, was viscerally at the forefront of my mind in this whole relationship that I was in with Lachlan. I really didn't want to inflict the same kinds of feelings that I was having, especially at this point, very dark feelings and emotions that I was having onto him. And I really assured myself that I wasn't going to do this to somebody who I believed to be my friend. And ultimately what I really thought and what I really valued and thought that I appreciated about this friendship was that even though he had romantic feelings for me, he was still willing to and wanted to be my friend. That's what I thought was really significant about this, that this person wasn't actually rejecting me. In a weird sort of way, this person wasn't rejecting me, even though I was rejecting them, and that therefore I mustn't reject them for who they are. I must accept them for who they are. And this leads me to lesson number 4, which is ultimately tallying all of the red flags, because this is what I should have started doing from this point onward. And by this point onward, I mean from this Zoom call onward. Now, this Zoom call was the beginning of the end. I think it was an example of what our Zoom calls became after this. This Zoom call was a Zoom call which involved him asking me repeatedly whether I was sure about my sexuality, whether I was sure that I couldn't possibly be with him. And it was very noticeable to me that me saying, yes, I'm pretty sure, that wasn't reaching home, that this should have really been the end of our friendship. But of course it wasn't. And of course the prying into my personal life got a bit worse. Because he wasn't taking my no for an answer, I posed a question to him, which is something that I just learned from therapy. Usually when you put something or you pose it as a question, which puts your example or what you're saying into an example and somebody has to answer it, makes it a bit more digestible and understandable. So I posed this question to him. I said, would you be happy being in an intimate sexual relationship with somebody, that is with me, who isn't attracted to you? Lachlan's response was the ultimate red flag, because Lachlan's response was, with all due respect, that's for me to decide. I couldn't believe my ears, but I am very, very happy and very proud of myself that I did not let anything like that influence me to saying that, okay, let's see how this goes, or let's get to know each other, in the way that you want us to get to know each other. And so I said, no, we're just friends. This isn't going anywhere. And he accepted that, or at least I thought he accepted that. And I thought that we had really made it past sort of a bit of an awkward stage or an awkward phase of our friendship. And this is red flag number 2. In the same Zoom call, after we had gone past this awkward phase, he suggested that we go on holiday together as friends. This was in order to celebrate this new chapter of our friendship, as well as this new chapter in things that were happening in his personal life. And you know what? On reflection, I think, why did I say yes to this? And I think there's 2 reasons why I said yes to us going on holiday. Right after he just told me that he was in love with me and that he didn't want to get over his romantic feelings. Right after he had said that it was for him to decide whether he could be in intimate carnal relations with a woman who wasn't attracted to him. I think there's 2 reasons why I said yes to going on holiday. I think the first reason was because I was getting somewhat annoyed with him asking me to come and see me at my house. I don't have anybody come to my house, to where I live. I live in a shared house, but I've never ever had people over into my space. It's just not something that makes me comfortable. And obviously I also just like my privacy. Shoot me. I also think I went wrong because of the following.
Men can never understand why females can have male friends, but we tend to believe that we can have male friends. And the reason why we kind of think like this is because we would rather have a friend who secretly loves us than a female friend that secretly hates us. Usually when men don't like each other, they separate from each other. Women, when they don't like each other, they'll make reservations together and they'll still keep in each other's lives. For men, if they play a sport together, they can pretty much be friends. For us, you can do everything right with a female friendship. All it takes is a birthday gone gone wrong or a boyfriend that they don't like, and the entire friendship is destroyed. And there's a safety in a male friendship that we can't find in female friendships, because it's very difficult to find women that are totally not threatened by you in any way, shape or form. The other thing is, I just think if you are a woman or a man of value, isn't it natural that men, women, old, young, everybody's going to gravitate towards you and want to be around you? It's a natural consequence of being a valuable person. If I'm a girl that only talks about hair and makeup, of course I can only have female friends. But if I'm a woman that can have a lot of different types of conversations, it's natural to be able to connect with different type of people.
I think I really wanted a friend, and I would rather have a friend who loved me than a friend who hated me or secretly disliked me, or not have a friend at all. But importantly, what I thought was love, or a friend who secretly loved me, was actually a friend who secretly, or actually at this point quite openly, had limerence for me. And because I don't want to waste any more emotional labor on this friendship, I'm just going to get the Wikipedia definition of limerence in order to add some detailed foundation to the rest of the story time. Limerence is a state of mind which results from romantic feelings for another person, and typically includes intrusive, melancholic thoughts or tragic concerns for the object of one's affection, as well as a desire to form or maintain a relationship with the object of love and to have one's feelings reciprocated. But what I really think is important here is the inclusion of intrusive thoughts, of melancholic thoughts, as well as tragic concerns for the object of your desire, because all three of these things are ultimately how Lachlan saw me in the entirety of our relationship, from manufacturing our meeting, our encounters, to watching all of my videos, where if you have watched all of my videos, you can see that I very much, I would say, come across as a bit of a damsel in distress at times. I'm very lonely, I'm very down, I suffer from clinical depression and other things that I'm not going to get into, but I can see how that can come across to somebody like Lachlan. And from this Zoom call onwards, things started to very much exhibit limerence. What I especially noticed is that he wanted to talk to me a lot more frequently than before, as opposed to understanding that I'm just a person who does not do virtual communication whatsoever. This was now becoming a problem for him. He wanted to talk to me a lot more frequently, at least once a week over Zoom. He also started ending all of his messages, not just sporadic messages as had been the case previously, but every single one of his messages with a kiss or an X. Now, this is a very, I think, British thing. I don't really see this beyond Britain, but typically when you are romantically interested in somebody, when you're flirting with somebody, I especially see this on dating apps, a guy will always end his text with an X to indicate, you know, affection. And this became very noticeable to me, not just the X's, but also how he started using lovely and my dear in messages. And this was all very suddenly after the Zoom call where I had said that, okay, let's go on holiday together. Now, there was a day when he wanted to have a Zoom call and I didn't respond to his message for reasons that I will explain momentarily. And mind you, we hadn't scheduled anything. This wasn't that we'd scheduled to have a call on a specific day at a specific time and then I had just blown him off or was ignoring him completely after I'd agreed to it. No, not at all. So he starts calling me. He calls me once, calls me twice, calls me 3 times, calls me 9 times. I miss all of this because I'm asleep and it's very late at night. And obviously in the morning, I apologize for all of this. I think what's really important here is his response to my apology. And remember this in relation to everything that I said about limerence, you know, intrusive, melancholic and tragic thoughts about the object of your concern. Sorry that I called so many times. Sometimes you just have a feeling or idea in your head, and the more you try and ignore it, the more intense it becomes. I was about ready to drive up to where you live today, armed with a hammer, and fight my way through hordes of Yorkshiremen to get to you, old boy style. And then, of course, I play the GIF. Oh my god. We have eventually another Zoom call, basically just to talk about this holiday, this very important holiday, which is the ultimate finale of this entire saga. Oh my goodness. You are not ready. He insisted on picking me up to go on this holiday. It's not something that I want. I'm not interested in having somebody pick me up. I'm quite happy to go to the holiday destination. And he wasn't, again, as per usual, taking no for an answer. He insisted that he was going to pick me up. He insisted that he wanted to come and see where I lived. And again, crucially, he said that he wanted to see the Yorkshiremen that I live with. Yorkshiremen are a major feature in this story. And I want you to have this image of Yorkshiremen. This image of Yorkshiremen, because I'm quite certain that this is the image of Yorkshiremen that Lachlan had in his mind throughout this entire friendship that we had. And now I'd like to get onto a bit more of a serious note, which is sort of a bit of foundational context for the finale of this story, I guess you can call it. Basically, during this whole situation and this year, I haven't been very well mentally. From mid-February to the beginning of May, I had the most intrusive thoughts that I have had at least since I was a second-year student at university. And such thoughts are nothing new to me, but this was quite new in that this was so intrusive that for the first time I had actually set a definitive date to call it quits. And I do think, reflecting now and being in a far better place now and just with everything, I do think that that setting of a date was very much a sort of weight off my shoulders, because everything that was causing me so much pain and so much suffering now seemed like it was going to end, and so I could actually cope until that date came. So during the whole thing, this whole situation, this whole friendship and everything that was going on, all these feelings, this romance that he was having for me, all this love, this was really very insignificant to me. This was not at all at the front of my concerns. This was not a priority for me. This really wasn't something that I was thinking about. With all due respect to Lachlan, he was not featuring in my mind whatsoever as anything but a person that I just had to keep appearances up with. This was a reason why I said sure to going on holiday, because I really wasn't thinking about the realities of potentially having to go on holiday with him at this point. My exit date was way before this holiday, so I really didn't. Sure, why not? Let's go on holiday. And as is indicated by his increasing, I would say, upset at me not responding to him, I was clearly going through things that he didn't know about. It was no fault of his. I am very private about these sorts of things, especially when I am going through these kinds of things. But he also didn't show any concern or any sort of asking, especially when I would hint, I guess, in a way, or indirectly say, you know, I'm going through depression, I'm going through a bout of depression at the moment, sorry for not responding to you, sorry for my absence, etc. And I think you really know that somebody isn't your friend when you apologize to them and you tell them about your struggles or about your pain, not in a lot of detail even, and their immediate and first response is to make it about them. And this is exactly what Lachlan would do. In his mind, me saying, I'm sorry, I don't want to speak right now, actually meant that I don't want to speak to him right now. And eventually this was clearly becoming a bit too much for him. He was becoming very passive aggressive, and this was clearly something that was affecting him, that I was not responding to his messages and that I especially wasn't making time to have Zoom calls with him. And so for the first time in our friendship, I actually said what I wanted to say. Note to future self, you are not in a good friendship if you can't say what you want to say, or you're afraid of saying what you want to say at fear of the other person. And so I said my bit. Okay, Lachlan, I get the impression that you're upset with me for not being there for you during some clearly difficult times. I understand and sympathize, but I'm also going through things which I deal with differently to you and won't apologize for that. I'm trying my utmost to be patient with your desire to not move on from your feelings for me. I get it and have no issue with it, but I cannot, as a result, play some kind of potential relationship that won't be. I can't fit into some ideal of a relationship you seem to have for us. I do think we need to speak about this in person, especially before we go on holiday, because this is starting to feel a little unhealthy and potentially quite devastating to what I thought was a good, easygoing friendship. Anyway, I really do hope you're doing well and looking after yourself physically and mentally. Best for this week. I could have said a lot more, but at that time, I think that was all I had enough mental energy for. And his response to this was that I no longer had to worry about his romantic feelings for me, that it wasn't a problem anymore, and also that I deserved far better from him as a friend. And I had hope. At that point, I guess I had hope. The next lesson can be taken from what I like to call the last Zoom supper. Now, this was a point when both myself and Lachlan were in, I thought, a much better state in our friendship. And I personally was in a much better state in my personal life. As you can see, I am well and alive. And there is a reason for this. I had decided that I had nothing left to live for. I had everything I needed. I had a date set, and I was done. In my mind, I was done. And as I said, I was very mentally not just unwell, but also quite mentally erratic at this point. And I made a decision. And this decision, now it doesn't make sense to me, and so I cannot imagine that it would make sense to you either, which is perfectly understandable. But, you know, that was what I was thinking at the time. And what I had decided was that I wanted to have sex before it was over. Now, if you have watched this channel and you've watched my journey in life through exploring modern society, either through explorative analytical videos or personal ones about myself, you will know that I have been celibate for years. Going on, this is like the 7th year that I was celibate. And I had been struggling with being, as is labeled, a femcel. Long story short, women didn't want to date me, let alone have sex with me for the whole year that I had been exclusively dating women. And obviously, inevitably now at this point, I had tried my best to be very optimistic about it. And of course, I am a very strong believer that absolutely nobody owes you sex. Nobody owes you a relationship. Nobody owes you love or anything like that. I hold no resentment toward women or toward lesbians or anything like that. It is just what it is. That is just how life is. And we need to go on and move on and not blame a whole demographic of people or even individuals for our own personal problems and a lot of our own insecurities that we have. I'm a very, very strong believer in that. So I don't say that with any resentment toward any woman that I've dated, any woman who I've been attracted to, or any woman who I've told my feelings to and they have not reciprocated it. You are entirely valid in your feelings and everything. And I have never ever breached when a woman has said that she just wants to be friends with me. I have never contacted them after that, and I would never dream of doing such a thing. Boundaries are so important, and valuing yourself is so important. So yes, no, I'm not saying this with any animosity, is what I'm trying to say here. So anyway, I decided that I wanted to have sex one last time. That was not going to happen. I knew that at this point. And so I had to narrow my sights down to not just men, but my male friends within my vicinity. I am not at all condoning my actions here. I'm not at all condoning what I did. I'm not at all condoning my mental state here, and I'm most definitely not even using that as an excuse here. I'm just relaying what happened, what transpired. I suggested to this particular male friend of mine at the time that we play a poker game, and I decided to suggest, whilst we were playing, that we make things a little bit more interesting, a little more higher and more fruity stakes. I needn't elaborate on what I suggested, but obviously I won. I didn't think it was going to be a good experience, and I most definitely didn't think that it was going to be anything different from all my really horrible, rough, and in some cases violent experiences that I had had before being involuntarily celibate with both men and with women before that point in my life. I thought it was just going to be like every single other experience that I'd had before my involuntary celibacy. But I wanted to do it one last time because this had been such a crucial part of me, this being celibate and also just being sexual, and especially coming to a point in the last year of coming to terms with who I thought I was, with my sexuality, and ultimately being disappointed in how it had all been going and not finding sort of the awakening and sort of warm embrace of my sexuality within myself that I had really hoped for and thought would be the case, and really just finding myself being even more lonely than I had previously been. Knowing more about myself actually made me feel even worse about myself, and that was quite scary to live with, and that was quite scary to accept of myself. Now, what blew my mind about this experience, excuse the pun, was how it actually was the best experience I'd had. And to be fair, I mean, I don't have many experiences to compare it to, and I'm not for that comparative sort of mumbo jumbo about these sorts of things, but it was a really, really positive experience. And this experience was actually so good to me and for me, in fact, that I ended up spilling my whole heart out to this person, and actually saying everything that I had been planning out to somebody made me realize like what I was actually going through, and like my mind, and how it was really how unstable I really was during this whole time, and how I'd been keeping it all bottled up inside of me and was just tormenting myself incessantly to the point of near insanity. And he really helped me through it, especially during this whole experience that we were having. And I'm no longer a femcel. So that important context is out of the way. And now let's go back to the last Zoom supper. At this last Zoom supper, as I said, Lachlan and I were both in a better place, I thought, in our friendship. And we were excited, I would say, to go on holiday. I was not as excited, definitely, because now I actually realized that this was actually going to happen. And it was starting to dawn on me how peculiar this whole situation was that I had inadvertently put myself into by not having the spoons, nor the time, nor the mental time and energy to cope with it. And so I thought that Lachlan could handle this, and I thought it was very, very important to tell Lachlan all of this. For the first time in our whole friendship, I actually decided to do all of the answering without being asked any questions. So I told Lachlan everything that he very much needed to know, that I had been in a really bad place. I told him everything that I had been going through mentally and what I had planned on doing. I told him that at that time I had met somebody and had gotten romantically connected with them since then, and that if I was going to go on holiday with him, that nothing romantic could possibly happen between us. And I was quite sure that this was okay, and that this was going to be received well, just based on everything that we'd spoken about with regards to him and his life for the previous hour of this Zoom call. He seemed to be moving on, he was seeing other people, everything was going well for him, I thought. Now, after I told Lachlan this, I can honestly say that these were probably some of the most bizarre, most inappropriate, most exploding moments and hours of my life. Very revelatory about what I really thought was a friendship of sort of mutual respect and mutual understanding. And it was really quite heartbreaking to experience this in real time, to experience the end of a friendship in real time. It was also revelatory that this was not in any way perceived as a friendship by Lachlan, that this was purely seen as an opportunity to prove himself as being my hero, as he called it at this point in time. Lachlan's response to me telling him that I was and that I very fortuitously had a friend who was there to help me through it, that I had this friend to unknowingly help me, not just with my celibacy, but also to help me with this that I had been carrying for months at this point, was, and I say this verbatim because these words will forever be branded onto my frontal lobe, but I wanted to be the one to save you. I wanted to be the one to show you what real passion was.
I cannot believe my eyes.
I couldn't believe my ears. And this was ultimately 3 hours of him having these very peculiar sort of panic attacks, sort of putting his head down, just us not talking for good stretches of 10 minutes at one point, just not talking, just him looking melancholy. I was sitting there just sort of, I didn't know what to do. I had tears welling up in my eyes because I did realize that this was the end, and it was definitely not the end that I wanted wanted, and I could see a lot more clearly the very toxic, very unhealthy situation that I had most definitely contributed to getting us into. And sporadically during these sort of panic attacks and these ums and ahs and huffing and puffings and like expulsion of breath very dramatically, he said some very interesting things. Like, for instance, he said that if we held hands on holiday, would this now be a problem now that I was sleeping with somebody? And I thought,
What?
wait, I'm sorry, what? Hold hands? Hold hands? When would I ever want to hold hands? When would I? So after this, and after the melodramatics, as I like to call them, because this was all very melodramatic, he sends me a message telling me not to contact him for 2 weeks. He just needs time to go over and to process all of this information because he really wants us to go on holiday, but that I must not contact him for 2 weeks and he will contact me when he is ready. So of course, unlike him, I respect that boundary. I just respond with a thumbs up to his messages, and that is that. But obviously, he phones me the very next day. Now, I was in a supermarket doing my weekly shop when I got this phone call. I never answered my phone, but seeing who it was, I thought, man, this has got to be good. So I answered. And so as soon as I answer, he immediately starts asking me very prying questions into my sex life, I guess you could call it. He starts saying that he has to come to terms with accepting that his paranoia that I was sleeping around was actually true, and that this is something that he has to get over, but he has to accept that he was right about this. And he then asked me an absolute banger of a question, if you ask me. This is a question that I have never been asked in my life. I honestly felt like I was in a movie at this point. And honestly, reflecting on this whole story, it really does sound like a film. And I think that that's very intentional, just based on the kind of, I think, person that Lachlan and that especially men like Lachlan perceive themselves as being, sort of very much characters in this sort of odyssey of their life. Everybody else is simply a character, of course not as important, and most importantly, not having autonomy beyond that of what the Lachlans of the world write them as. And it is most telling, reflecting on this, how everything transpired. And especially in reflecting on this, as I said, banger of a question. He asked me, whilst I was deciding whether to get protein-packed eggs or regular eggs, who was more important to me, him or Loverboy?
Hold up, wait a minute.
You know when somebody asks you a question that they already know the answer to, but they either don't want to accept the answer, or they either just want you to say it in order to have their theatrical moment. Mind you, and just let's remember with all of this, I have only known Lachlan for a maximum of about 6 months. I have only met him in the flesh on 2 occasions for no more than 10 hours in total. I haven't seen him since the end of last year. This is honestly a no-brainer, in my opinion. So whilst he's digesting what I have just told him with a lot of very melodramatic sighs, you know, and a lot of prying questions continue, of course, I tell him that I am not going on holiday with him, that this is not happening because of just everything that has transpired, because it is clear to me that even though he has said that I didn't have to worry about his romantic feelings, that he was getting over his romantic feelings, that he was in a better place in his life, that this clearly was not the case, that this was clearly not something that he was ready to handle or deal with. It was very clear to me now and very apparent that his intentions for our holiday were very nefarious. I can honestly say that at this point, I would have felt very unsafe being on holiday with him. I would have felt, just with things that he personally told me about himself, about his feelings and everything, that I was not going to feel comfortable, that I would not feel that I could even close my eyes around him. And I did not see that as in any way meeting the requirements of a holiday. And of course, as I said, this whole situation was just so inherently and entirely toxic and unhealthy. It was not going to work. This is the perfect example of a male-female friendship that can never work when one person is attracted to the other person, and especially in this case, is not willing to get over those feelings or not making the effort to get over those feelings. and to most significantly come to terms with the fact that the other person does not reciprocate their feelings and never will. This holiday wasn't friends going on a holiday together to just enjoy each other's company. This holiday was clearly very important to this story or this odyssey of his life that he was writing for himself, of which I was a character that he was going to save and rescue and probably, I don't know, have passionate love with. And I realized that he's actually the individual of my desires. Everything that I had said, everything I had relayed to him was just feeding into this whole narrative. It was becoming very apparent to me now. My saying that I wasn't going to go on holiday with him resulted in him giving me an ultimatum. And the ultimatum was that either I go on holiday with him or our friendship is over and that he will never speak to me again. Now, if a friend ever does this to you, just know that they are never your friend. If your friend has said, bitch, you're going on holiday with me, otherwise we are no longer friends, and they mean it, that's not a friendship. I told him that I was not going on holiday with him, but that instead of very emotionally putting forward this ultimatum, we should still try and see if we can be friends. That he should take as long as he needs, whether it be a month, 2 months, a year even more than that. I really didn't care. I didn't give a date or anything. I said he needs to take his time to really just figure things out with himself and with his life, and that then when he's ready, if he's ready, he can get in contact with me and see where we stand, if we can still be friends. And I can't believe I did that. I can't believe I did that, because that really was not at all what I should have done. I should have called it quits there completely. That was my opportunity. I didn't take it. I messed up. Oh well. Fortunately for him, he was able to then have his moment. And this was a moment that I saw as ultimately just that. A moment. A moment in a screenplay. A moment in a very melodramatic, very heartbreaking story of lost love. The tale par excellence of unrequited love. At this point, it is with a heavy heart that I announce that Lachlan ended our friendship for good. Cue the violins. It's been interesting knowing you, and I'm sorry it ended like this. There is no point trying to be friends, because ultimately I can only see you as a friend under certain conditions. You saying outright that Loverboy is more important sealed it. Sorry that I can't see things from your side. The strength of my feelings to you was too strong. I'm surprised you didn't realize the depth of it, considering it's perfectly clear in the messages I sent all the start of the year, in which you at least strongly implied that you reciprocated those feelings. The rewriting of history is so beautiful. The paranoia that I had in that you were sleeping with one of your housemates, that I rationalized as paranoia, and which ended up being true, was all too much of a nasty shock that I am not strong enough to get over. Forget me now. It can't just be me. This is so melodramatic. Forget me now and focus on the relationship you need and want. I would have messed things up further down the line anyway, and it would have been more painful. I won't say any more. I am sorry. Again.
2 hours later.
If you could pay me back the share of the holiday as soon as you're able, please, so we can just bury this deep and move on. And that, brethren, is the story of male-female friendship, as it most definitely should never be. I hope that this is a lesson to you. It most definitely now, on reflection at least, is a lesson to me. I cannot believe... Yep, that's the end of that sentence. I cannot believe... I honestly sit in my room all day, editing videos and writing scripts and going on Reddit to see what people are angry about. I cannot believe that I had a life's worth of a friendship with somebody in a matter of a few months. It sounds like the kinds of books that particular men write. We all know those men who now feature very prominently on Reddit on r/men writing woman. This sounds so much like that. Just everything. It just sounds so terrible. I was very annoyed with, as I like to call it, the melodramatics of that message, and I did write a very long, very detailed email with receipts, with quotations and references, dispelling everything that he said about his paranoia of me sleeping around with Yorkshire men, his paranoia of me having strong feelings for him and reciprocating his feelings. All of that, that was just absolutely wild to me. I thought that was hilarious, very entertaining, very interesting, but also really showed me an example of a relationship where somebody just cannot accept your autonomy and sees you as a character in the story of their life that is of their making and of their writing, and you have to conform to the role of the person that they have written you as. And I think, unfortunately, this is an example of a relationship that started from parasociality and turned very much into limerence and no way into love. This is not romantic love. Romantic love accepts that a person is a flawed human being that you cannot control, that you cannot coerce, that you cannot manipulate or deceive even into being with you. And that was a very sad revelation. I have, as a result, become very distrusting of people. I am now constantly walking around with a jagged fence around me because I don't trust anybody anymore. And it's sad. It is sad. I do think I will get over it. I think it is just a response to this very sudden breaking up of a friendship that was happening at a very peculiar time in my life, and that was sort of a very big friendship, even if it wasn't the thing at the front of my mind and I was just doing it because I sort of had to go through the motions of doing life every day whilst I was dealing with everything. It was a thing that was happening, and of course, based on everything that happened, at least once I felt a lot better and was doing a lot better mentally, it was definitely a very traumatic sort of experience to reflect upon, and a very traumatic ending of things, a very sudden ending of things that I was not expecting. I hope you enjoyed this more personal video and this sort of story time of sorts. Do let me know in the comment section if you would like more videos like this. Thank you so much, and I'm so sorry that you had to endure my very croaky, very raspy, very breathy voice. I am quite sick at the moment. Thank you so much for watching this video. Thank you so much to Bellessa for sponsoring this video, and don't forget to check out my giveaway if you would like a free gift card or a free sex toy. Everybody wins, remember that. Maybe not Lachlan, maybe not me in relation to Lachlan, but everybody else, you win. And do tell me as well your friendship stories. Tell me your stories about friendships that have either ended, friendships that have been toxic, friendships that have resulted in, I guess, unrequited love, or if you have been a Lachlan in someone's life, because I'm sure at some point we have all been the person who is not the good person in the story of these friendship situations or in these relationship situations. So I would love to hear your reflections on that. Again, thank you all so very much, and I'll see all of you very, very soon in the next one.